AI will fix the entertainment industry. AI will solve climate change. AI will renew Firefly and make your poor old dog walk again. Right after Gogh has one more racist meltdown. It's fine. He just needed to get it out of his system. More and more these days, we're hearing variations on the above. We're being told that AI technologies, whether that's the generative transformer-based neural network models of today like ChatGPT, Claude, Sora, and so on, or some hypothetical super advanced cousins that'll get built any day now, are the solution to everything. And sometimes we're even hearing that from people who aren't in charge of AI companies. Today I want to offer some pushback, because I think this narrative is dumb and harmful, and I think a lot of the people pushing it, particularly those in the arts or in journalism, should know better. And I'd like to do this primarily through an entertainment industry case study, an article in The Wrap, the independent Hollywood news organization, written by Roger Chang, the site's managing business editor, titled "AI is still a dirty word in Hollywood. That's the problem." See, for a couple of years, I've been getting newsletter blasts from The Wrap, ever since I signed up for a free trial to help me make a video. I think it was the Bob Iger one, maybe? And generally, these are cool. I make a lot of videos about the things that come out of Hollywood, so it is handy to get an overview of what's going on there in my inbox. Nice job, The Wrap. But the other day I saw the aforementioned article pop up. Naturally, the title piqued my interest, and I proceeded to read the biggest load of shite I had in a while. Before I even reached the bottom, I knew I wanted to make a response video, that this one piece could act as a microcosm for a lot of the things wrong with the current AI discourse. And since I couldn't figure out a way to make mostly looking at a few articles for like an hour and a half visually interesting, we're doing the face thing again. You get to watch me lose my mind talking you through all this in person. Lucky you. A quick aside on that, actually. The benefit of not having been on camera much before now is that I think my audience is largely freer, the type of parasocial weirdo who would watch me speak negatively about something then jump online to harass those involved. But if I am wrong there, and that's you, knock it off. I am going to heavily criticize that writer Roger Chang's work and a few of the stances underpinning it, but also he seems kinda sensible in some other important areas, so on the off chance this video blows up, let's try to be normal and humane in the way we carry out critiques and disagreements online. But yeah, in the first part of this video, we'll go through the article at a rather leisurely pace, partially because it really creamed my corn and I want to bring out why, and partially because the problems AI creates and the problems AI faces are similar across fields. That is, taking a magnifying glass to the arguments used to push AI in one environment, here Hollywood and the entertainment industry, will afford us a better understanding of how AI gets pushed and why everywhere else, of what AI as solution actually means, and why we should all be very fucking wary of that line being pushed. A tying together of these things will constitute this video's second part. Some context, though, before we get going in earnest. First, on the general state of this whole AI boom as of late August, early September 2025. It's not going great. While it's true that a lot of user numbers are still increasing, and that AI CEOs keep projecting infinity money being made any day now, the business world has started to realize that the technology as it exists now isn't really changing the game. A recent study from MIT, which we'll be talking more about later, found that AI investment led to zero returns in 95% of companies. 95%. To be clear, that study concerned regular businesses trying to integrate AI, not the companies developing the stuff, but also, to be clear, things aren't great with those big dogs either. I talked last year about the way none of this is profitable at all, and unless you're Nvidia, that is, the company selling the AI labs their computer parts, that's still absolutely true. The big AI companies, OpenAI, Anthropic, and so on, all continue to burn inconceivable amounts of money and require record-breaking rounds of funding simply to keep the lights on. It's also worth noting that, partially spurred by that MIT study and the stock shocks that followed, the status of AI coverage in the mainstream media is changing. Recent weeks have seen fiercely skeptical pieces get published in the New York Times, the Atlantic, the LA Times, and many more outlets. The world Cheng's article has released into, then, is one beginning to ask questions about AI and to recognize its limitations, more so than ever before. The second relevant contextual note is that a lot of people in the tech, business, and media spheres stand staunchly against such a re-evaluation, that true believers in the sky-high potential and imminent leap forward of AI. Often that conviction gets in the way of proper fact-checking and common sense. Some call these people shills, some call them boosters, but the term I favor is AI evangelist. It captures both the depth of faith these people tend to have, and their need for everyone else to get on board. I think it's important to make clear up top that Roger Cheng, the writer of today's article, is one of these guys. He is not a neutral observer. The AI features he's written since joining the wrap earlier this year make this very clear. Let's take the briefest of peeks at the first one, making sense of the billion-dollar AI megadeals, and I'll show you what I mean. The article opens by throwing the usual numbers at the reader, some of which are made up. Sorry, are projections, and while it does admit that there is a frenzy here, that things might be somewhat out of hand, it reasons this is all a slight exacerbation caused by FOMO. Cheng quotes one analyst who affirms that yes, AI will disrupt everything. We're also assured a little later on that if there is an AI bubble, experts don't think it will bust anytime soon. You guys remember the irony note? Well, this is the citation needed note. There are in fact a lot of experts who disagree with Cheng here. We noted a little of this increasingly mainstream skepticism a moment ago, but more to the point, there have been for a while. A whole last year ago, Goldman Sachs head of global equity research Jim Covello publicly called into question AI's ability to provide adequate returns on investment. Similar calls of skepticism notably appeared from Sequoia Capital and from the CEO of investment firm Double Line Capital around the same time, and again have only increased in volume since. Beyond this, there's plenty more not-so-subtle AI aggrandizement throughout this explainer article, both positive, you've surely already experienced these super-duper helpful tools yourself, reader, and negative. Cheng notes as AI's downside, not the hallucinations and limitations that still impair AI from actually working in businesses, but the awe-inspiring, definitely not exaggerated projection that it'll take half of entry-level white-collar jobs in the next few years. Even seemingly unremarkable phrases like this one earlier on, companies and individuals alike understood the promise and potential of AI, hide pretty weighty subjective judgments and assumptions. A neutral way to get this point across would be something like, companies and individuals alike saw potential and promise in AI, but Cheng's phrase suggests a definite future of AI success existing separately from the judgment of those companies and individuals. It's a small detail, but one absolutely representative of Cheng's wider way of handling this topic. One more example of the way Cheng introduces this evangelist bias through framing can be seen right after that bubble ain't poppin', trust me bro section. Sure, we're told valuations are soaring because of FOMO and hype instead of business fundamentals, but we are not to worry because The Economist discussed this, the ability of venture capitalists to conjure up vast valuations for AI startups with scant regard for old-school spreadsheet measures already, and termed it vibe valuing. I'm sorry, am I having a stroke? The numbers don't make any sense, but it's cool they're just vibe valuing? Sorry, officer, no, I wasn't doing donuts in the middle of the motorway, I was just vibe driving. Now, the point to make here isn't that old-school spreadsheet methods of valuation, also known as, valuation, might be better than basing this stuff on hype and FOMO. No, that's not the point to make here, because The Economist basically made it already. Did you miss it? Their article's headline is AI valuations are verging on unhinged. Way to bury the lead, Roger! Are you doing vibe journalism? Again, Cheng introduces bias through framing, here quoting a somewhat tongue-in-cheek phrase from The Economist as an entirely serious justification. Sorry, I know this is a lot for an introduction. I just want to get across that fundamentally this guy does seem to be high enough on the AI pipe that it's biasing his reporting. So as you watch the rest of the video, and as you see me chalk thing after thing up to Cheng's AI evangelism that could maybe just be mistakes or coincidences, please know that it's not coming from bad faith or projection. It's coming from my having observed wider trends beyond the one article. The last thing to note is that all of this has real stakes. I've talked before about the economic, artistic, and political ones, and I'll be touching on this point again later, but dear lord, is the generative AI boom environmentally wasteful. Even putting to one side questions of equipment manufacture, the global cooling requirements of this stuff are expected to expend more than half the UK's total water usage by 2027, and the amount of power data centers across the world use is estimated to rise past the total power usages of Japan and Russia by next year. You might recognize water and electricity as two of the things we should be doing our absolute best to conserve as our planet enters the coughing up blood stage of climate change. This level of waste is scary to think about, but that's why I'm thrilled to be partnering with my friends at Planet Wild for this video. Planet Wild is a community-based nature protection organization, and when you join, you become a part of their community, and your membership funds a new conservation project each month. It's basically crowdfunding, but for nature. Instead of like a Steam Deck knockoff, you're putting your money toward a world your kids can breathe in. What I love about Planet Wild is their transparency. They document all of their projects through video reports you can find right here on YouTube, and through text reports on their app. You'll also get to collect a badge for every project you support. Very fun. Like I mentioned above, responsible water management is really important actually, and cool story, this time last year, Planet Wild's community funded the creation of so-called Earth Smiles across a 100-hectare area in Kenya. These Earth Smiles help to combat the country's growing droughts and should retain 2 billion litres of water over the next 20 years. Now obviously, climate change is not something we can solve as individuals, but we stand the best chance of mitigating its impacts by pursuing government-led top-down approaches and community-led bottom-up ones. In the past couple of years, I've done a little ecological volunteer work myself. It felt really good to be doing something, however small. It's on hiatus, at least temporarily, because I had to move, but I love that as a Planet Wild member, I can still be a part of that bottom-up prong remotely. And you can too. So if you guys want to become part of a community that's making a difference, think about joining. You can give any amount, and every dollar or euro or pound or krona helps. And little gift from me, the first 100 to sign up using my code PILLAR10 get their first month paid for by me. So claim your free month by scanning my code or clicking my link down below. You'll see your impact on their YouTube channel in under a month, and you're free to cancel anytime, no questions asked. Check it out. But anyway, all that being said, our background is now well and truly covered. Let's get into the main event. The AI is still a dirty word article begins as follows. After Natasha Lyonne announced in April that her directorial debut for the film Uncanny Valley would embrace elements of artificial intelligence from Asteria Film Co., a company she co-founded to use AI tools to create animated films, a tsunami of criticism crashed down on her. And right away, there are a few problems with the framing of, oh wait, you guys didn't know about the Natasha Lyonne thing? Okay, some background on this. The Russian doll and poker face actor made headlines in April and May of this year after announcing she would star in and for the first time direct a film, Uncanny Valley, and that this film would be produced with generative AI tools. To quote the synopsis given in a Rolling Stone article about the project, Uncanny Valley follows Mila, a teenage girl who becomes immersed in an open-world augmented reality video game with the boundaries between physical and digital realities increasingly blurred. And as the Wrap noted, the film's set to be produced by Lyonne's own AI production house, Asteria. Lyonne reportedly co-founded the studio back in 2022, but only announced her involvement with it earlier this year. And the spin Lyonne's cohort has been attempting to give is that this is great news, actually, because their model is fair. Again, quoting Rolling Stone, Asteria and its partner Moon Valley AI recently debuted the video model Mary, which they tout as clean and ethical because it was trained only on licensed content, whereas similar models have scraped publicly available or copyrighted material without permission. And we'll go on to discuss Asteria's project in more depth, but first, a quick note on that discussion's framing. The video you're watching now is a few different things at once, and one of those is a response to the Wrap's article, and as such, I'm following Cheng in following online discussion and approaching Asteria as the Natasha Lyonne AI situation, but I think it bears clarifying here that we shouldn't be directing frustrations solely at her. Public critique is getting directed at Lyonne more so than at her co-founder boyfriend and current Asteria head honcho Bryn Musa or anyone else involved, because A, she's more of a public figure, and B, misogyny probably doesn't help. But going from the fact that he's sort of a career entrepreneur bro, and also bearing in mind the slightly confused comments Lyonne has made about AI, this quote of hers in a Vulture article on Asteria isn't really something you'd say if you accurately understood the way today's AI is basically a marketing term being applied to machine learning technology. It's kind of like saying, the shop said they had tissues, but the guy actually gave me a Kleenex. I do wonder if Asteria is more Musa's baby than hers. That doesn't absolve her, of course. Either way, I think this is pretty vile from her. As an actor, she should know better. It's just something I thought was maybe worth noting. Anyway, the first thing that'll strike you should you choose to look into Asteria's general deal is how scarce actual information is. There are like 2 sentences here. Interestingly, one of those 2 sentences does tell us Cheng made an error in his first paragraph. Asteria isn't sticking to animation, but if you were hoping for any technical or legal information, you're shit out of luck. Linked at the bottom are 2 documentary studios, presumably Asteria promoting clients, so keep your eyes peeled for some fresh AI slop dropping on XTR any day now, and that's kind of it. Well, almost, because clicking on careers clarifies that Asteria isn't independent and is in fact a wing of Moon Valley, an AI lab running on over $75 million of venture capital and big tech money. As we saw above, this link has been reported on as a partnership, which doesn't seem the most accurate label. This general lack of transparency is very common in AI circles. Most of the time in this business, the only time you get details is when they're offered to favorable press outlets by company insiders, and while it's not a shock to see those practices carry over here, I think it's equal parts funny and pathetic for a company attempting to sell itself as the good pro-artist option to take this PR strategy. Ethical AI, we're squeaky clean, we promise. But you do have to take our word for it. A look at Moon Valley's website is a little more instructive, primarily because it lets us see this ethical model, Mary it's called, in action. While again, we're not given access to a bunch of information, technical details, small print, or whatever else, Variety reports that Mary itself is the result of Moon Valley's partnership with Asteria, and I can't even see that anywhere here. We are at least able to see some product demos of Moon Valley's foundational AI model, built to meet the standards of world-class cinematography. Now keep that copy in mind, and let me show you some of the demos. Remember, world-class cinematography. Yeah, the best Mary demos here still have that glossy AI art finish, human movement remains firmly within the uncanny valley, and object perspective is still subtly off. And those are the best. Regarding the rest, let's just say if I ever get a hankering for footage of a guy walking past moving wallpaper, I'll know where to go. But let's be fair, while the level of quality these demos attest to is still well below, actual movie level, I can see how some of the tools Moon Valley offers could be handy, even at this stage earlier on in the process. And I can even see use cases for them which don't directly replace artists. For instance, take a look at the camera control and motion transfer functionalities. Sure, simulating certain camera moves ahead of filming days could stop a low-budget indie from unexpected on-set hiccups, that sort of thing. I am willing to grant that some uses of some of these tools are low in negative externalities. Except, of course, for that ruinous environmental cost, and the creatives still exploited in the training of even these ethical models, more on that soon, and the ripple effects of normalizing AI use. And I'm not just pearl clutching with that last one. See, when we discuss the marginal utility and possible uptake of tools like these, and especially if we're championing them, we have to be careful, because if we're not, we can end up carrying water for a whole lot of other, more destructive elements. Because the subsumption of a whole bunch of more or less related processes, from large language models, text-to-image models, non-generative machine learning solutions like the Thanos stubble tech they used in the Avengers movies, or face-recognizing computer vision, all the way to hypothetical, generally intelligent systems, into the catch-all term artificial intelligence, means even when you promote the ethical AI companies, the ones trying to direct tech like this to more benign ends, that cheerleading has the effect of legitimizing less ethical actors in this space too. A rising tide lifts all boats, and when you've lifted them, which one do you think's gonna get out of the harbor first? The SS ethical practices, or the HMS continue to steal everything and undercut workers? To be clear, I'm not saying this means you should never write about possible less bad uses of deep learning products or even generative AI specifically. Hell, I even did so here a while back. But I am saying you need to be aware of that dynamic if and when you choose to do so, and I don't think Chang or the rap is. I mean, just look at the headline of the article. Even if the body of the piece were a nuanced, responsible, measured evaluation of companies like Moon Valley, projects like Lyonne's, and the niche, arguably benign use cases that might result, spoiler alert, it's not by the way, that headline still nudges the takeaway toward being everyone needs to get on board with AI generally. And if you're still not convinced this is something we need to consider with so-called clean models, how about the fact that the people behind them agree with me? A piece in Vulture by Leela Shapiro, which we'll discuss in more detail later on, notes that one investor, Herman Tanea, the CEO of General Catalyst and one of the most powerful evangelists for AI in the world, saw Asteria in part as a public relations project for artificial intelligence itself. If you want to transform an industry, he told me, you have to win the hearts and minds of society. Storytelling is a big part of that. We also have to remember that being good for an AI business doesn't make these businesses good. And I'm not even talking about, emissions or whatever here. No, the thing that makes Moon Valley ethical is that they've paid to license training data like movies and shows. But, paid who? There was a big strike in Hollywood recently. Maybe you heard about it. One of the issues that aggrieved today's creatives, and rightfully so, was the way the benefits of previous new technologies like streaming had sort of bypassed them. Industry standard payment terms didn't apply nearly as fairly to these new modes of distribution, so you'd see cases like Orange is the New Black actor Kimiko Glenn getting a grand total of $27 in foreign residuals from the show all month. The reason that wasn't changed as streaming became dominant comes down to corporate power, yes, but the reason it happened in the first place is that it's very hard to even try to contractually future-proof your income when there's no telling what that future's going to look like. So I'll ask again, paid who? Because none of the people writing or starring in the myriad films and shows a company like Moon Valley licenses to train on had clauses in their contracts stating, if the project ever gets used to train some futuristic people-replacing machine, then I get X% of the licensing fee, right? No, it'll be rights holders, which tend to be the studios. Supposedly, this people-replacing machine is good because it lined some executive pockets as it gobbled up decades of creative work. And hey, maybe I'm wrong. I'm not an industry insider, I'm just some fucker with a microphone. Could be there's some innovative, old actor and writer outreach program Moon Valley have, where they're also compensating people besides studios, but if that is the case, it's kind of weird neither Asteria nor Cheng mention it. Seems like the sort of thing you'd want publicized. Come to think of it, it's kind of weird this whole issue, how ethics lines up with the realities of data licensing, doesn't get any attention in the article. Isn't this exactly the sort of tricky question we should be asking? Or more precisely, that an AI-positive business editor at a Hollywood trade should be asking? Regardless, there's a slippage here between ethical and no less ethical than current standard practice, which I think we ought to note, and which I think calls the fundamental premise of AI as solution into doubt. AI entrepreneurs and evangelists would have you believe they're ushering in technologies to democratize industry and generally improve the world, while in reality, the compromise solutions they champion, the lowered bars they press the rest of us to accept, end up further entrenching existing systems of inequality and exploitation. Oh, and one last thing. I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that Lyonne herself has stated the point of Asteria isn't to make use of those pre-production streamlining technologies to make sure low-budget projects can pre-visualize certain camera moves or whatever ahead of costly shoot days. It is to attempt big effects-heavy films without having to hire FX teams. And that's the 411 on the ethical AI stuff Natasha Lyonne's got herself involved with. The stuff the Raps article thinks we should all be a little more open to. Because that is more or less the angle here, and you can probably tell so already from some of Cheng's phrasing. A tsunami of criticism rained down on poor old Natasha. We'll talk more later on about how the tone of this writing contributes to the article's general sliminess, but for now, suffice it to say the effort to position Lyonne as wrongly opposed, as ahead of her time, continues. Rather than discussing the fact Lyonne was bombarded at the Poker Face Season 2 premiere by questions from skeptics in media journalism spaces, perhaps repeating the defense she gave to Deadline, and I quote, "It'd probably be wise as a community to start distinguishing the details here, because if we're just jumping at every AI turn, then we should all be throwing our cell phones away." Cheng instead begins by covering criticism from a Reddit thread. We're told that user Steve is posting thinks she's a hypocrite, and that u/Butterson daughter doubts her directorial chops. Great. Mercifully, Cheng does discuss some non-Redditor backlash next, albeit briefly. A Salon article on this whole Lyonne mess by Coleman Spilled is quoted. "She's too high up to notice all of the little people whose careers are in jeopardy for the sake of cheaper, less artful filmmaking." But this is lip service to the existence of a non-Redditor biz opposition, and not a lot more. You can see that Cheng doesn't care to actually engage with Spilled's piece from the way he will, a few paragraphs later, rather sympathetically feature the very Lyonne quote, "Suddenly I became some weird Darth Vader character or something," which Spilled's article takes apart in the process of, making its main point, which I'll also quote. That Lyonne has chosen to position herself as a victim and a villain in this conversation is telling. She's the one with the power here. No one is trying to cancel Lyonne or topple her empire or blow up her Death Star. Her detractors are simply asking for a little bit of empathy and a back-and-forth conversation. No, the Salon piece is only quoted here to gesture vaguely at the existence of some opposition to projects like Lyonne's outside of Reddit, and to provide a segue into the wrap's baffling main thesis. The harsh reaction to Lyonne's announcement underscores the negativity that surrounds AI, and the shrapnel you risk taking just by talking about it. But that's the real problem. Directors, actors, writers, or other creatives choosing to ignore AI do a disservice to themselves by not educating themselves and others about its potential impact. Yikes. So this is some paternalistic bullshit. This is concern trolling. Those sweet, stupid creatives don't know what's good for them. Snuggle up to Team AI. We're big, clever boys. We'll take care of you. But it's also kind of incoherent, right? The problem isn't the negative impacts AI might have, it's stubborn anti-AI folks not preparing for the negative impacts AI might have. This is victim blamer logic, very poorly disguised in a faux compassionate affect. I'm taking the thumbs up back. Also, obvious one here, but you don't need to use AI yourself or even get on board with it conceptually to learn about the dangers of it and educate yourself, right? Case in point, that more critical Salon article Chen quoted above is far more informative about those dangers than anything Lyonne said about her little project, and than this article too, for that matter. There's a bunch of quotes here, and there will be a few figures later on, but very little is actually said. You'll see what I mean there by the end of the video. It's also worth noting here that shrapnel literally just means questioning. This is an awfully common pattern among AI cheerleaders, especially those with platforms. They seem to think we should just take their word for it. They seem to think being asked to explain their grandiose claims in any level of detail is excessive negativity, and that being posed issues like the ones brought up in the Salon article, the way you're going about this is actually causing real problems for less famous people, constitutes victimization. No, you see, the Changs and Lyonnes of the world are the real victims because they get a tough question now and then, and that's kinda like getting hit by shrapnel. A lot of this next paragraph is just Chang rephrasing his thesis. It ends with him teasing a new idea that studios and big-name stars are already embracing AI. Supposedly this whole thing's already a fait accompli. This prefigures something he goes into later in the article, so I'll address it when we get to part 1C, timecode on screen now if you really can't wait. But there is one other part I want to pick out, the idea of some crucially important knowledge gap that's responsible in part for endangering the smooth adoption of this tech. That's not a Cheng original. In fact, in recent weeks, largely in the wake of that MIT study, it's been seized upon by AI-positive journalists and commentators as sort of the excuse du jour for these clearly great technologies not quite working yet. As an example, see this article from Fortune, a fairly poor attempt at running damage control for that study. Jeremy Kahn writes, "Where it gets interesting is what the study said about the apparent reasons for these failures. The biggest problem, the report found, was not that the AI models weren't capable enough, although execs tended to think that was the problem. Instead, the researchers discovered a, quote, learning gap. People and organizations simply did not understand how to use the AI tools properly, or how to design workflows that could capture the benefits of AI while minimizing downside risks." In response, I'll quote tech writer and podcaster Ed Zitron, who very helpfully released a sprawling newsletter, How to Argue with an AI Booster, not long after I started writing this video. He writes that an incorrect read of the study has been that the learning gap makes these things less useful, when the study actually says that the fundamental gap that defines the Gen AI divide is that users resist tools that don't adapt, model quality fails without context, and UX suffers when systems can't remember. This isn't something you can learn your way out of. The products don't do what they're meant to do, and people are realizing it. So yeah, it's not that people and organizations didn't learn, it's that the tools didn't learn. Fortune's article and the myriad voices echoing its talking points, such as good buddy Roger over here, are misreading the study on a very basic level. Wonder if they got an AI to summarize the study instead of reading it themselves. Let me quote another part of the study. ChatGPT's very limitations reveal the core issue behind the Gen AI divide. It forgets context, doesn't learn, and can't evolve. For mission-critical work, 90% of users prefer humans. The gap is structural. Gen AI lacks memory and adaptability. Now, maybe there is an explanation here besides these pro-AI writers either lying or not actually reading the study. Could be that they all hit their heads really hard afterwards, but my money's on that first one, lying. Or rather, a sort of lying variant. To explain what I mean, let's look at the last part of this section of the article. Chen quotes Duncan Crabtree Island, director of the Hollywood Guild SAG-AFTRA, who seems to think AI is here to stay. Quoting him in the article, You can't block technology, just like the drivers of stagecoaches couldn't block the invention of cars, or silent film actors block the invention of the talkies, Crabtree Island told The Wrap. All you can do is use the influence you have to put guardrails around how they'll be implemented. What's more important than the accuracy of this quote, at least initially, is the function it plays for the article. It's part of Cheng's effort to paint an AI-dominated future as inevitable. But despite the various worrying numbers and systemic weaknesses in AI we've discussed already, and that we will continue to discuss, and indeed that we will add to, I'm not even going to argue that this inevitability angle is wrong. I'm just going to observe that the rest of the article's weirdness makes a lot more sense with this inevitability lens in mind. Cheng goes from a concern troll to a forward thinker, a martyr, showered with shrapnel in his own time, but one the AI historians of 2027 will regard with kindness, because AI isn't the problem if it is a force of nature. Think about it. If I built a house on the San Andreas Fault with no better earthquake proofing than I'd use in central England, and then the house fell down, the biggest problem, or at least the most manageable big problem, was my design, not the fault, right? So Charlie, get out of the shot. You shouldn't be in the shot. Shot's only for YouTubers, and you can't read the teleprompter anyway. Come on. So in a world where seismic, AI-wrought disruptions in entertainment are both inevitable and imminent, this paternalistic victim-blamer logic remains a little callous, sure, but also pragmatic. In that hypothetical world, that is, which isn't ours, because I was lying a moment ago. I am going to argue against this idea of inevitability too, obviously. Again, there are the numbers, the studies, the overlooked fragility in the way this whole sector basically relies on the continued growth and health of one company, Nvidia, but beyond this, well, to start with, the idea presented here is one hell of a false equivalence, right? If, for the first 5 years of talkie technology's implementation, viewers didn't get to hear properly prepared audio synced up to a motion picture, but were instead made to withstand garbled, low-res noise, or audio tracks that very regularly got the intended dialogue wrong, talkies would have stopped getting made. Moreover, the appeal of a motor car or a movie with audio is obvious, intuitive. Not a decade after the production of Model Ts began, Ford was able to stop publishing advertising altogether. The cars sold themselves. The appeal of AI is so obscure that even the AI ads I get served don't know what it is. Here's one I had the presence of mind to screen record from a couple of weeks back.
Really inventive ice cream flavor that does not exist in the UK.
How about a full English breakfast flavour with swirls of baked bean puree and crispy bacon bits?
Just what I always wanted. Bacon bits on my horrible ice cream.
Pickled onion could be interesting. It would have that tangy, savoury flavour. You could even add some caramelised onions for sweetness and texture.
Scotch egg waffle cone, here we come.
It also feels worth noting that, yes, Crabtree Island is a proponent of actors' rights, is an important figure at SAG-AFTRA, but well, just that. He's a union guy with a background in IP law. I'm sure he went to great lengths to educate himself on AI, but I think it's fair to say his background doesn't necessarily lend itself to being an accurate judge of AI's technological and economic future prospects. And maybe more importantly, I think it's also worth noting that an awful lot of that union's members, including a good few high-profile ones, were very critical of the AI provisions in the deal he negotiated, and the AI defeatist tone struck by guild membership during the 2023 strikes. There are many members of Crabtree Island's union that would not co-sign these words, and it's clear from the rest of Crabtree Island's comments in this article that even he is basing this level of pessimism on predictions of future AI. In the very possible scenario that the bubble does burst, that the capacity of AI labs to better their products or even run their current models at scale contracts, AI suddenly looks a lot less like the talkies or the motorcar, and all of this changes. The people pushing AI are convinced theirs is the next big thing, the next cloud, the next smartphone, the next internet. To speak in very general terms, there's sort of a pattern successful big things tend to follow, and with maturity or adoption on the y-axis, time on the x, it looks like an S-curve. To begin with, progress is slow. Maybe the thing doesn't have enough backing or infrastructure or enough spotlight until some key breakthrough is made and everything starts changing so quickly and people start paying attention, so you get more resources and the tech improves faster and faster and the money prints itself and so on. But eventually, there's always a ceiling. Maybe your competitors catch up. Maybe you simply push the product as far as it can go, and the pace of development, or at least significant development, slows and slows. Think about the way smartphones got popular and then got better super quickly, and then for the last 10 years, all the iPhones have been the same. Big tech is in the process of making an incomprehensibly expensive series of bets that large-scale transformer-based neural networks are here, not here. That, in iPhone terms, the technology underpinning AI right now is basically the 3G, with Touch ID, Siri, high-speed internet and all that still to come. But let me tell you a secret. They don't know. Because the tricky part of innovation is that there's really no way to tell how far up the curve you are at any given point, except in retrospect. If there is no quantum leap forward on the horizon, and honestly signs point to no, if we're already at the iPhone 8 or 9, tech heads and their cheerleaders in the press will very quickly come to understand how that one emperor with the new clothes felt. So believing we're here is fine if you put together a good enough argument for it and, you don't bet the global economy on it, but AI evangelists like Cheng make the assumption that huge imminent advances in AI are inevitable and then argue from that point while hiding the fact that any assumption has been made at all. So in one way, the most important part of this inevitability doctrine isn't even how likely it is to be true. It's the rhetorical abuses it allows in the now. The way it allows any AI evangelist with a platform to say, if the future looks like X, we have to do Y, and to have everyone else not notice the if. Cheng's article does exactly this near its end, but he certainly didn't invent this little rhetorical flourish. In fact, it's kind of the ideological backbone of AI as a whole. Journalist and AI expert Karen Howe observes in her recent book Empire of AI that the logic of the field's leaders like OpenAI is logic that only works under these specific, somewhat circular assumptions. AGI, that is some quantum leap forward in non-human intelligence that big tech would have us believe is imminent, despite being amorphous and unknowable, is also inevitable. But as Howe sums up in her introduction, nothing about AI, even as it exists today, coming to the fore, or even existing at all, was inevitable. It was the culmination of thousands of subjective choices, made by people who had the power to be in the decision-making room. In the same way, future generations of AI technologies are not predetermined. Howe also goes on to observe the very real way their circular thinking allowed OpenAI to keep cognitive dissonance at bay, as it progressively compromised its founding ideals, exploited workers, and released flawed, harmful products. I quote, "Under the spectre of AGI's unstoppable arrival, the company needed to keep developing more and more models to prepare itself and to prepare society. Even if those models carried with them their own risks, the experience they offered to prevent or face possible AI apocalypse made those risks bearable." AI evangelists everywhere have learned to follow this playbook. I mean, this is more or less Cheng's thesis, right? Undefined future AI advances are so certain as to basically already have happened, so stop whining and get on board with it now, even if doing so actually worsens conditions and standards in the present. Once you realize this, you see how much of the Wraps article is basically shadowboxing. The running theme is how to prepare for the impact of AI, not how to adjust for currently existing implementations. And even the detractors quoted here are arguing against something theoretical, something that's still coming. And this explains the way what that study actually said about the learning gap doesn't matter, why sympathetic tech journalists habitually misrepresent those kind of inconvenient truths. AI evangelists are not concerned with reality. Okay, that sounds mean. Let me put it this way. When you or I engage with the discourse around generative AI, or God forbid the technologies themselves, we deal with what's there, the outputs we get, the experiences we have, and the facts and figures that are published. It's different to an evangelist like Cheng. Remember, AI is inevitable, and if AI is inevitable, it's obviously going to be better by the point it disrupts everything. And if it's going to be better, the outputs we get now, the experiences we have, the numbers that exist, kind of aren't important. This is the reason one more the Wrap email blast I got while finishing this script sees Cheng label a historic $1.5 billion copyright payout from Anthropic, a company that lost $5 billion last year alone, a speed bump. That's a very particular choice of phrasing that takes care to imply the certainty of smooth sailing ahead. Major recurring issues then, like the persistent hallucination problems that years of tinkering and further billions of dollars worth of training seem unable to fix. To evangelists, They're just little bugs that don't happen much, really. And if they do, it's because you're using them wrong, and also because it's early days. Soon they won't happen. Why bother trying to get the facts right? Why bother telling the truth if the myth of inevitability is more important anyway? So yeah, that's what I meant by a sort of lying variant. The brain distortion field generated by this idea of inevitability then is our first key takeaway. So hold on to that. But now it's time to take a look at this article's next section and the ways it rather poorly attempts to show that this inevitable uptake is already underway. To begin with, Chang writes that the blow-up of ChatGPT in 2022 led to a mixture of wonder and fear over generative AI's ability to come up with new concepts on the fly. If we were trying to nitpick, we'd stop here to point out that this is not what generative AI does, that it can repackage existing data points and present them in superficially new ways maybe, but that it doesn't really do new concepts, and that Chang knows this too. The two examples he gives are travel itineraries and decent book reports. But the real first point to make about this section is that it doesn't merely oversell where products like ChatGPT were in 2022, it oversells where their newer, supposedly far more advanced versions are now, too. They still can't do these things properly, and I've got a fun little tangent here to show you this. After reading this article, I finally signed up to ChatGPT and used their LLM for the first time. Travel itineraries, eh, Chang? I thought, sure, let's see how that goes. I took a minute to think of a prompt and asked it to create a travel itinerary for my trip to attend a then-upcoming Counter-Strike LAN event in London, starting from the UK city of Stafford, going by rail, with a few non-negotiables like wheelchair access throughout and dinner at a different spot offering gluten-free options each night. I threw in a couple of preferences too. Ideally, we'd be staying somewhere with a view of the river, and the dinner places would have vegan options also. To be clear, none of this is me. I'm not vegan, I don't particularly crave a view of the Thames, I don't have any mobility restrictions, and I didn't attend the gaming event specified. That being said, I do follow Counter-Strike, and last year I did attend Blast London. I don't have to eat gluten-free, but my partner does, and I picked Stafford not because I live there, but because I have travelled on the London Crew line Stafford's a stop on a few times before, and as a result I expected ChatGPT would have me go through Euston Station. More on why that matters soon. None of this is me, but it's all near enough that I have a lot of background knowledge relevant to this hypothetical trip. Because well, buying into something like this is a lot easier when you don't actually know how good the output is, right? But to be able to accurately judge something like this, you need to be able to spot the possible problems. And okay, to be fair, that isn't a totally straightforward prompt, but also to be fair, most people have some amount of specific requirements or preferences when they travel, whether they be dietary, mobility related, financial, and so on. So if the future of creative technology can't handle a task with a couple of pretty minor curveballs, well then, it can't really be said to handle that task at all, can it? And if AI only makes life easier for able-bodied people with completely normative asks, once again, it's effectively entrenching existing structures of oppression rather than ameliorating them. Feels worth noting. Anyway, that was my prompt. ChatGPT thought for a minute and a half and then gave me an itinerary. And listen, I half expected to have to run this experiment at least a few times, maybe to have to do some halfway intensive fact-checking, but no to both. I mentioned picking a starting point whose natural route would take me through Euston earlier, right? As expected, this is how my travel itinerary begins, and the plan reminds me to take use of TfL's step-free interchange guide, but still recommends I start by taking the Victoria line from Euston. But I can't do that, because there's no step-free access to the tube platforms at Euston Station. So that's a good start. And the next elements that struck me as I skim-read this plan for the first time were the restaurant recommendations. Saturdays is most egregious. I don't mean to brag, but living in London for 2 years alongside a partner with celiac disease has given me a general picture of the capital's gluten-free dining scene. So seeing the plan mention Leggero, supposedly a spot doing handmade Italian pasta or senza glutine in the heart of Soho, was a head-scratcher. How on earth had I not heard of this place? Viewer, the chatbot sent me to eat at a place that's been closed for 6 years. And it was in looking at the long-defunct Leggero listing on Google Maps that I realized another problem, one affecting the other restaurant plans too. Covent Garden, Victoria, Soho, none of these are even remotely close to the event in question, which is being held way out in Wembley. That's like an hour away, presuming best-case train schedules and no further delays caused by doing the route step-free, which matters because that Counter-Strike event isn't going to be wrapping up until 8:30, 9ish, presuming no prolonged overtime overtimes. All this to say, our weary gluten-free gamer won't be eating at Indigo at 1 either. Again, none of these are even things I found point-by-point fact-checking. They're flaws that stuck out to me as I skim-read the plan based on casual, pre-existing background knowledge. So if that's anything to go by, I can't even imagine how many more issues you'd run into if you actually tried to follow this. Long tangent short then, the rap is misrepresenting ChatGPT's capabilities. It can't do these things now, and it certainly couldn't then. Again, evangelists like Cheng are not concerned with reality. To them, these flaws don't really matter, because of course AI will be able to do all this properly soon. We know that because AGI will obviously be better than this, and AGI is inevitable, so there. In the evangelists' analysis, the current state of this technology, or rather the public image of that current state, only matters as a reference point against which to plot imagined future gains. Case in point, Cheng's about to follow this up by misrepresenting the trajectory and likely impact level of these technologies' adoption, by bringing up Dario Amodei's already infamous quote that AI could wipe out half of all entry-level white-collar jobs and spike US unemployment to 20% in the next few years. That sounds scary until you remember that Amodei is CEO of Anthropic, an AI company, and not one of the 5%. This is, of course, equivalent to asking the CEO of a lawnmower company how many people he thinks will be using his mowers in a decade, hearing him say, oh yeah, probably a couple billion, and printing that figure uncritically. I guess we can't blame the Rap's managing business editor too much for doing so. Many of his journalist colleagues have been huffing this particular variety of idiot gas, but in case you're still worried, I'll quote that MIT study again. Research found limited layoffs from Gen AI, and only in industries that are already affected significantly by AI. There is no consensus among executives as to hiring levels over the next 3 to 5 years. In case you're having trouble parsing that, it's basically study talk for Dario Amodei is full of shit. None of this is to say there won't be some jobs lost to AI. Some already have been, but even with these, AI is more often an excuse to lay people off, to concentrate more work onto fewer workers than it is a substantive replacement for human employees. Think copywriters or translators getting laid off, then hired back to do practically the same job, to work longer to accomplish the same outputs in some cases as AI humanizes. But we've covered all this before on the channel. Anyway, Cheng follows the Amodei quote not by warning the reader of the man's obvious vested interest in making AI seem as advanced as possible, but by venturing that society at large isn't more rattled by this definitely true prediction, because we've all personally started to embrace chatbots ourselves. So true! I love it when they tell me to kill myself. It's worth dwelling on this point a little longer, not because we have all learned to stop worrying and love the chatbot, but because thinking about who the article quotes and how they're quoted lets us see the Rap's bias pretty nakedly. See, if you write an article about something like this and most of the supporting voices you quote are industry figures, positioned either as sympathetic, put upon visionaries, or as prophets, and most of the critical voices you quote are fucking random Reddit users, some of whom are just venting, that's not even-handed journalism. You are doing a bias. It's true Cheng does loop in a few critical voices, even some that aren't random Redditors, but even those are softballs. Again, Section 1 quoted Salon's Coleman Spilt, who had written a far better article than this one, yes, but who in Cheng's own words, was not mad about Lyonne's embrace of AI. Crabtree Island, the SAG-AFTRA source, has warned against AI in entertainment, but again, he's hardly the staunchest prominent AI critic in SAG-AFTRA. Spoilers for the next section, but we will go on to hear about some actors' daughters' misconceptions of the AI process. Great! Are we going to hear what your milkman's dog thinks next? And before we move on, it's worth noting that it's not just quote choices, right? As noted a few minutes back, we can see the bias in the article's tone, its choice of words. It's not well hidden. Lyonne was unable to quell the rage of her detractors. Later on, Cheng will tell us that AI announcements in the entertainment biz elicit their fair share of hand-wringing. These are not neutral word choices. The structuring of the article is important here too. After every moment of concern Cheng deigns to mention, there is a but, or we hear from a grown-up in the know about AI, sagely minimizing those worries. What are you doing, Roger? Do you think this isn't obvious? Do you think the people reading this article are literal babies? Anyway, let's keep going, because there's one more double scoop of bullshit Cheng's serving us before this section ends. Scoop 1 is that we are getting on board with chatbots. That's why we're not losing our shit over Amodei's ominous message, and the numbers prove it. Just look at this graph showing the growing numbers of ChatGPT's weekly active users by month. Well, by some months. The reason these data points are so intermittent is because pretty much the only time we get these numbers is when someone internally decides to randomly drop some. In all likelihood then, these aren't representative data points, they're selectively picked high watermarks. And on that topic, if you're wondering about the metric itself here, yeah, right? Surely monthly users makes more sense here? Well, to again quote Zitron, OpenAI is deliberately using weekly active users so that it doesn't have to publish its monthly active users, because doing so would likely reveal a paltry paid conversion rate of 3% or lower. Zitron also makes the point that we don't even know what weekly active users means. It has been asked, and the company has not clarified. It could literally mean people who visit the website or open the app one time in a week. Are those really active users? This might seem like splitting hairs, but I want you to notice the degree to which all of this AI evangelism is built on sand. The way both the arguments figures like Cheng make and the information companies like OpenAI release are just compulsively vague, are incapable of exactitude. The way you can pick a seemingly solid piece of data, put it under the microscope, and realize you still don't know what's actually being claimed. That's important for later. More importantly now, though, the numbers aren't even right. Probably. I mean, we don't know. Again, none of this is remotely transparent. But this is where that 800 million in April figure comes from.
I mean, you told me that we're like doubled in just a few weeks. Like in terms of compute or in terms of...
privately, but I guess...
Oh.
A few moments later.
You know, something like 10% of the world uses our systems now.
Yep, Sam Altman, clearly not wishing to talk numbers on the record, is pressed to explain a factoid he dropped backstage to wow the host and responds that maybe it's like a tenth of the world. Divide 8 billion by 10 and hey presto, we get our 800 million. Now, putting aside that an off-the-cuff, vague estimate made under pressure probably shouldn't ever have been considered reliable enough to plot on charts and base reports on, you know, right? They have since walked that number back. A few months later, back in July, Axios reported that a more exact version of Sam's vague estimate was over 500 million. So not that much more than back in February. And a few weeks later, we did get another random OpenAI guy disclosing an even higher number. Apparently they were on track to hit 700 million weeklies at the start of August, but A, I think we've established that these non-specific, irregular in-house stat drops are maybe not reliable enough to be taken at face value, and B, even if they have just hit 700 million, even if these numbers are correct, this is how that chart really looks. Aren't we still in early days? Isn't it all getting better and faster and more sophisticated constantly? Wouldn't a slowing rate of growth at this point call that trajectory into question and kind of be a huge issue for the tech's future? No! Don't ask questions, just look at how big the lines are on this chart that's wrong. But this all makes sense, per Cheng, because, and I'll quote, "The large language models powering AI chatbots are getting more and more powerful. The changes are coming faster than ever, which is reason enough to be intimidated by the technology and its potential disruption of everything." Yeah, the LLMs are getting more and more powerful. That's why ChatGPT's user base reacted so badly to the new flagship GPT-5's functionality that OpenAI had to restore access to the prior version. It's pretty tricky to prove this claim false. The primary benchmarks for AI performance are devised by their manufacturers after all, but in terms of practical utility, rather than trust me, I made up a test for my model and this time number is bigger, yeah, ChatGPT's users will be the first to tell you that no, the rate of meaningful improvements to model capability has slowed, actually. There's a vagueness to Cheng's claims here we can clear up a little bit by looking at his prior pieces for the wrap. That first article of his we touched on in the introduction expands on changes are faster than ever by writing, "The pace of innovation has been relentless. It takes a year for a new iPhone to arrive. Computers may get a software update every few months. Updates to AI models offering new capabilities like multimodal inputs which allow you to speak or feed it images that it can understand are coming out every few weeks." That's... what? Okay, it is true that over the past couple of years, the major AI chatbots have rolled out multimodal capabilities, and that's not nothing, but I said couple of years, and I meant it. Sound and vision rolled out for ChatGPT back in 2023. To suggest that these features, or even others equally significant, are being rolled out every few weeks is fucking Moonman talk. Again, no examples are given. This feature was added on this date following that feature on that date, or anything like that. And when you do try to corroborate the suggestions of evidence that Cheng does include, when you zoom in, It's vagueness all the way down. I feel like I'm being gaslit. We're back to vibe journalism. Case in point, why are we even talking about ChatGPT's user numbers or update pace? Are we talking about studios like Asteria Moon Valley, or aren't we? As we'll see, all the future examples the article will touch on are image video generation. And while yes, ChatGPT has been integrating multimodality of late, trying to position this graph, even if it were accurate, as evidence for anything remotely connected to the Asterias and Moon Valleys of the world would be a crime against statistics. But I know why he's doing it. I mentioned earlier that AI is essentially a marketing term. It always has been. Even prior to the machine learning era, way back in the 50s, the phrase artificial intelligence was first coined for this reason, to replace the significantly less flashy term automata studies, to sound flashy and futuristic and attract buzz. All discussions of AI are, to some extent then, applying sci-fi terminology, laden with fantastical implications to real, limited technologies. And one result of this semiotic mismatch is the ease with which AI evangelists can engage in a sort of Motte and Bailey tactic. They flit seamlessly between discussion of actual techniques, existing businesses, of AI present, and a theoretical, unified fiction of AI future. The former is evidence for the latter. AI must be coming because of an undefined large amount of chatbot users, and the latter is defense for the former. That chatbot's current abilities don't matter because it will be way better in the future. It's retrospective logic, working back from a future that probably won't exist. The moment you pull the inevitability plank out, the whole Jenga tower falls, but when the name of your field, the idea of your field, comes from a projected sci-fi endpoint, the impulse to get away from the current, actually existing details, to bring that Motte and Bailey out, is sort of baked in. That's key takeaway number 2. Lack of specificity is a feature, not a bug of pro-AI discourse. Don't let them get away with it. Chatbot uptake is simply not relevant to discussion of Asteria-like businesses attempting to disrupt filmmaking with AI. Hell, they can't even figure out a way to pretend the writing capabilities are on par with LA coffee shop screenplay hipster levels. To again quote that Vulture piece by Leela Shapiro, Lyonne had attempted to use AI for screenwriting, but the results didn't meet her standards. I have not figured out at all how to use it in writing that I actually feel good about, she said. I want it so badly to work. Holy shit, right? So keep all that in mind during the next part of the article. Hollywood is already using it. This section begins with Cheng repeating recent PR from various industry players, primarily Netflix's Ted Sarandos and Warner Bros. Discovery's David Zaslav, discussing their initial steps toward AI in Hollywood. The former bragged about the recent Argentinian Netflix show The Eternaut using generative AI, and about the streamer's convictions of AI's potential, and the latter praised the then upcoming AI-assisted upscale of The Wizard of Oz for the Las Vegas sphere. After this, Cheng gestures loosely at the idea that filmmakers themselves are doing the same, but besides Lyonne only actually name drops one, before ending with a kind of interesting reference to the Vulture article I've brought up a few times already. Let's start out with a Zaslav point. 3 things. First, this isn't a film, right? It's an AI upscale of an existing film. Even if it is very innovative, it is to actual filmmaking what microwaving a Rustler's burger is to cattle ranching. Hollywood's already using it, sure, Raj, but not for the purposes you're suggesting. Second, hey, this is David fucking Zaslav, the guy who pioneered deleting finished movies as a tax avoidance scheme. One of the guys at the helm of that mass layoffs to make the books look better trend. When we're conceptualizing what the future of Hollywood should look like, why the fuck would we pay attention to him, let alone cite him positively? Third, let's not lose sight of this word here, upcoming. Cheng is citing a project which had yet to release as evidence of this AI uptake, and that's fine. He's not wrong that out or not, this is an existing cinema-adjacent example of AI being used. But doing this does risk hitching your cart to something that might turn out to be counter-evidence, a case study in why this stuff isn't ready for the prime time, why even soulless mega-ghouls like Zaslav are relegating it to their sphere upscaling divisions. Because the Wizard of Oz thing sucked, it was ass. I'll quote a few excerpts from a review in Variety by Peter de Bruges. By making the foreground or background slightly fuzzy, they cue us to concentrate on the characters in center frame. But at the sphere, as in IMAX, we can decide where to gaze within the frame, requiring every detail to be crisp, but there's almost no consistency on that front. The actor's appearance and expressions are limited by the original footage, and the most troubling change to me was whatever strange AI technique was used to replace Judy Garland's face with a poreless plastic sheen, where film grain and delicate lighting gave her skin a certain softness before. Dorothy's once glistening eyes now look almost cowl-like, framed by fine CG eyelashes, while her makeup and freckles vary from shot to shot. These techniques are even more distracting in crowd scenes, where unblinking Munchkin extras stare into space for minutes on end, or the citizens of Oz act in automaton-like loops. When some AI engine starts to make decisions on behalf of a performer, it's no surprise that lands us smack dab in the uncanny valley. There's more. It goes on like that for a while. Go read the piece linked below like all the others if you're curious as to precisely how. But the TLDR on the Zaslav of it all is that even if he were an authority you'd want to quote on how the industry's future should look, his big AI bet has just shown us why Hollywood isn't doing this yet. It's similar with the Darren Aronofsky-led studio Cheng will very briefly reference in a minute. They too have released an underwhelming piece, one that, per The Verge's Charles Pulliam Moore, makes the AI film hype feel pretty premature. It's possible some of the other potential high-profile AI projects Cheng references have since dropped too, but I can't comment on their quality because we're not even told who the AI startup claiming they exist is. Yeah, as non-falsifiable claims go, trust me, this guy I met at an AI conference said all the cool celebrities you love are doing it too is a doozy. Okay, let's talk about Netflix. Now, I don't know how many minds I'm about to blow, but when the head of a company says he's confident about something in a public earnings call, that doesn't necessarily mean he actually is. See, there are these new things called shareholders, and no, fuck it. I can simplify this point, actually. If Netflix was on board with AI to the degree reporting like this would have you believe, these articles wouldn't be about them using it in a show they have to tell you exists. They'd have used it in Wednesday. Also, people like Sarandos and people like Cheng know you haven't seen the Eternaut. I mean, hey, if this video pops off, maybe a few of you will have done, but generally, that's why they're talking about the show's use of AI like it's some huge, intricate achievement. But, do you want to see the extent of it? There. One or possibly both of those shots used generative AI. That isn't nothing. The biggest mainstream example of Hollywood use evangelists would brag about previously was the use of AI software Runway in Everything Everywhere All at Once to speed up removal of background objects from some shots. And obviously going from that to generated images in a Netflix project is a step up. So I don't want you to think it's not significant, or that there's no less visible AI uptake going on behind the scenes. To again reference Leela Shapiro's article in Vulture, the same one Cheng mentions in a moment, that piece saw Shapiro reach out to concept artists who discussed the way rogue actors at studios can launder generations through hired artists. And it saw Shapiro speak to a producer who admitted other producers were already replacing pre-production talent with prompts. Now, this is not good, particularly if you're a concept artist or enjoy seeing new and unique design work in film and TV, but what this isn't is AI generating movies. And there are reasons it hasn't gone beyond this, and that current usage tends toward the ad hoc, towards those use cases which leave no visible fingerprints on the final product. Primarily that, again, like in enterprise, the quality simply is not there. So far, Hollywood studios aren't confident enough in generative AI, not in the quality of its output, or in the acquiescence of the industry and the consumer base to embrace it on any meaningful scale. Even Asteria Moon Valley, the studio / research lab / whatever the fuck that has everything to gain from striking ahead, changing the norms, showing what properly funded AI visuals can do, is using Mary to generate trippy CG VR style visuals for that uncanny valley thing. It can't do live action. If it could, that's what they'd be doing. And editing me punching in real quick with an update, Netflix's Sarandos very recently made headlines by kind of walking back some of this AI optimism. I think that the idea that AI will out-imagine things and humans is pretty unlikely. It's quite the antithesis of what it's built to do. AI is meant to take all the things that have ever been done and give you the most predictable outcome, which is the opposite of what writers try to do when they write a screenplay or that a filmmaker is trying to do when they tell a story. So I don't get too nervous about it displacing creativity. This comes as Sarandos is hyping up a new animation collaboration with Guillermo del Toro, and that's important. In this moment and in this context, it benefits Sarandos and Netflix to downplay AI's capabilities. Doing so helps generate some hype for this more authentic stop-motion project. Just like in that moment and in that context, months back, the one Cheng focuses on, it benefited them to play up the Eternaut's innovative embrace of AI. I'm breaking the continuity of this video and adding this update in because this story clarifies two things. First, that what someone like Sarandos says publicly about something like AI should not be taken uncritically, that it doesn't represent the truth of his company's or his industry's approach so much as it represents what he wants to be seen saying at that specific time. And the corollary of this is that, Jesus Christ, Netflix must be having some internal doubts about the glorious AI future if their man's out here shit-talking it like this on Main. Also off topic, but this project sounds pretty cool, right? Stop-motion animated film based on Kazuo Ishiguro's The Buried Giant? Sign me the fuck up. Anyway, back to your regularly scheduled programming. At most, stuff like those 2 seconds of the Eternaut and the Hysteria stuff is groundwork being laid for a possible future where the tech gets much better and much more sustainable. And that might happen, maybe. But equally, it might not. Transformer-based neural networks are not magic. The technology has limits, and more it seems like we're starting to see them. What's more, again, the continued usage and improvement of them at scale relies on a very specific, very fragile economic climate. This, more than any compassion for creatives or reverence for the art itself, is likely the reason the studios haven't gone all in on AI. Betting the farm on this makes an already shaky industry even more fragile. There is no sensible reason to blindly assume, the way AI evangelists or those guys doing vibe valuation do, that this will all continue indefinitely. And certainly no sensible reason to assume it'll not just continue, but will get way, way better. Which it kind of has to go beyond the present levels of ad hoc, corner-cutting use. Vulture's piece quotes a rather unimpressed animator producer, Joel Kuwahara, who tried an AI storyboard editor out, as saying, "It was terrible. I was trying to prompt it to move the camera up 10 degrees and it gave me a whole new house." Kuwahara accepts that if these tools worked as the hype suggests, they would be useful, but quoting Shapiro, most of the tools he'd tested so far hadn't done what they'd claimed. Incidentally, we do well to remember that the words of a Kuwahara are worth more than those of a Zaslav, because stock doesn't lose value if he's honest about the wrong thing. And also, while we're talking about this whole Vulture piece, I said a minute ago that Shapiro's article details the shady backdoor uptake of image generation in Hollywood, and it does detail it. We have specifics, we have quotes, and anecdotes, and all the other things you'd expect from a piece of journalism on a heated topic that makes a big claim. Also, even as it makes that big claim that in some capacity this stuff is being used more than you'd think, it remains critical of its own narrative. Shapiro is maybe a little overcredulous. Hollywood isn't moving faster because the technology isn't good enough yet, emphasis mine, but she balances that credulity out by sharply recognizing what's being sold here isn't technology, but the promise of future technology. Cheng's article does give Shapiro's a nod, but like I suggested at the top of this section, reading that nod does feel a little strange because, look, I'm not alleging anything untoward here, but the two pieces are oddly similar. Very few parts of Cheng's piece don't echo some section of Shapiro's, and those that don't stand apart, like the ChatGPT glazing, and are noticeably weaker. The Raps piece reads almost like a bizarro version of Vulture, like an AI evangelist used Shapiro's piece as the skeleton for a sanded-down, lower-resolution rehash, one garish in its confidence where the earlier article doubts and considers. Again, I'm not accusing anyone of anything here. I'm simply pointing out that Cheng has read Shapiro's piece, and ergo that he has seen an example of how to do this properly. It's strange he took so much from it apart from that. This is getting long and I'm getting mean, so let's hit that last section. Closing the education gap. Cheng begins with a brief case study, discussing the experience of actor Breckenmeyer, and yes, the experience of his daughter too, on Arcana Labs' AI short film, Echo Hunter. We then briefly check back in with Duncan Crabtree Island, Netflix, and Asteria's Bryn Musa as Cheng runs through how they're all getting ahead of, and I quote, the expectation that AI will play an outsized role in, well, everything. Fundamentally, of course, this whole closing the education gap section is rooted in a false premise, or at least a wonky one. Objection A is that more people don't need to try spinning up commercial AI entertainment companies, and we don't have to stop being critical of those who are in order to educate ourselves on the potential problems and current capabilities of the technology. Case in point, Shapiro's Vulture article. I think it's safe to say someone reading that gets a better, more balanced, and more reliable picture of what's going on in this space than some actor showing up for an AI-enhanced shoot. Or, hey, this video, right? Have you learned something today? Did we need to destigmatize AI for you to pick some info up? Objection A and a half is that learning about AI does not equal getting on board with AI. Even in a world where everyone working in Hollywood gets terabytes of reliable, sourced info about the history, the technical details, and the current capabilities of generative AI beamed into their heads, there's no reason to think AI would stop being a dirty word. Indeed, I would argue it'd become an even dirtier one. Objection B is that, as we've seen, this whole learning gap discourse being had in AI spaces this element of Cheng's article seems to be in conversation with, is mostly based on a misreading of a recent study. The thing that needs to get better at learning is AI, not us. Like I said, wonky premise, so this doesn't need to be a long section, but I do think it's worth drilling into the mini case study we're given about Breckin Meyer and Echo Hunter, which the actor gave at an AI conference. You know, to recap, Meyer went to set, but he wasn't stood there alone next to a computer. There was a director and a production team and everything. Wow! I'll quote Meyer. It was never me just with dots, alone in a room with an orb, which I think a lot of people think it's going to be. No, I'm in it! Oh, well, as long as you're in it, phew! What we're supposed to take away from this section is a sense of relief, right? That yes, disruption may be happening, but AI films, at least AI films like this, aren't so different from regular movies because there are still stars. A prominent creative went on set, red lines got filmed, and so on. I think that's a fair read of what Cheng's trying to accomplish with this inclusion, one I can't imagine even he would disagree with, but to me it reads a different way. It's still being presented as disruption, as streamlining, as cost-cutting, but by keeping the focus squarely on the remarkably photogenic D-lister, the implications of that cost-cutting remain obscure. Holy shit, is that guy John? From the Garfield movies?
Get him, Garfield!
God damn it, they got to John. Sorry, but that's what this is, right? Don't worry, everyone, the celebrities get to keep their jobs, it's only the people that don't matter getting replaced. But maybe that's just me. Fucking hell, what was that? I'm also rather enamored with the way Garfield John's credulity is related. He knew nothing and gobbled down the totally unbiased info the AI production company with 500 Twitter followers generously offered. As he relates, once it was presented to me and spoken to me as I needed to be told, AI for idiots, it helped a lot. You know what, I'm bringing the irony note back for that one. And yeah, in case it needed to be said, no, this AI short film isn't any good either. If you want more details on that, hey, maybe I'll take a closer look at it for the October Patreon video. Editing me, did we end up doing that? Yep, we did. You can watch that now, or I don't know, maybe in like a day or two, depending on when this video comes out, over at my Patreon page. Link up there, maybe? Before we move on, it's also worth discussing Arcana Labs, the production company behind Echo Hunter, because per Deadline, this is another positive AI disruptor in Hollywood, and wait, hold on. Scroll up real quick. Something about this article's... Oh, god damn! The fucking Trump Gaza video was made with Arcana Labs tools? That's the studio whose impact we're praising at the article's end? What are we doing, Roger? And you don't even bring that up? Jesus Christ, don't do this to me, Roger. Listen, we're gonna beat this thing, Roger. We're gonna beat this thing together. Don't you dare give up on me, Roger. After this, Duncan Crabtree Ireland is brought back up. He understands AI is coming, Cheng tells us. Note once more here the heavy lifting done by the inevitability myth, note once more the slippage between the existing and the possible, and as such, SAG-AFTRA is helping members prepare by providing articles, podcasts, and seminars. Seminars like those offered by Asteria. To be clear, I'm not trying to disparage union leadership's attempts to prepare members for a future they see as inevitable, even if that's an assessment I and many of those members do find to be unhelpfully defeatist. What I am trying to do is question the framing. Is this some cool studio union cooperation nobly working to get creatives in the know, close the education gap? Or is this a cunning business practice being deployed to add another revenue source to companies in a famously unprofitable industry? Not only are companies like Asteria or Arcana selling shovels for the AI gold rush, they're double dipping and very generously offering classes on how to use them. And hey, you know what? If the visibly emaciated prospector telling me there's gold in them thar hills said he had to sell me shovel lessons before the shovel actually came, that's not exactly a vote of confidence in the shovel's digging efficacy, is it? Kinda sounds like I'm being sold a substandard product. Next you're gonna tell me there's not any gold in the hills. Wonder if that's a relevant thought. No, it's gonna be fine. It's gonna go well. Yeah, I mean, if the guild is prepping, if the problem is the knowledge gap and it is being closed, let's check back in a year if we're all still alive and see if Hollywood is now on board. If closing the knowledge gap has fixed all of those underlying social, environmental, and, oh yeah, product issues. Presumably everyone will sign up, the AI movies will look way better than they do now, and the AI startups will be printing money. Don't look at the study. You know what? I'll set the reminder on my phone right now. Come back to this comment section 1 year from post date, and I'm sure I'll be very apologetically linking to all the Hollywood AI success stories. And, you know, if I am wrong, presumably a malevolent AI god will be forcing me to eat my hat again and again for all eternity. So there's that to look forward to also. But mercifully, we've reached the end of the article, so let's reflect. We'll start by recalling our earlier key takeaways. Much AI evangelism is motivated by a belief in inevitability, justified by an ultimately circular logic. Partially as a result, AI discourse is plagued by vagueness and the tendency to privilege assumptions and PR over real experience and real data. In a just world, though, the information and reporting we as laypeople have access to, understand new technologies like generative AI through, would filter all that nonsense out. More reporters would ask tougher questions to the people pushing this stuff. More journalists would make an effort to be precise in their discussion and filter out misinformation. But we do not live in that just world. And that's our next key takeaway. By and large, mainstream journalism's coverage of AI has failed us, and has done so in an almost invisible way. Reporting like the Wraps gives people around the world a pair of binoculars by which to view Hollywood, and Hollywood's interaction with new forms of technology. But if the lens is warped, everything we see becomes distorted, and it is not easy to tell that from the outside. I don't want you to think I'm attacking journalism itself. The pushback I'm attempting in this video would not be possible without journalism. We need journalists now more than ever, but we need them to do their jobs properly. Like Karen Howe, like Leela Shapiro, like Alison Morrow, like the guys over at 404 Media. We need journalists like that. Journalists who are critical of power. Journalists who don't phone it in. Because when it comes to AI coverage, a lot of them have been. Also editing me punching back in to say I wrote and recorded this one prior to the whole Tilly Norwood Nothing Burger hype cycle, which just proves again how far vibe journalism is leading the conversation. I'm not going to talk about that in any more depth here. You know, I need to get back to being editing pillar of garbage, but if you do want to see a good discussion on this, I recommend this recent video by Kyle the Scott, which does a great job at pointing out how fucking dumb all of that was. As a result, a lot of dumbasses in suits now hear AI and think robot god that'll do anything. In science, in entertainment, in every field. For instance, I mentioned the video game Counter-Strike earlier, right? One baffling news story from the CS scene about the American organization Wildcard broke as I was writing this. Some context. Wildcard had a pretty good team, all things considered, in 2024 and early 2025. They were quite away from the top, but given the location and scale of the organization and the caliber of players they were able to attract, they'd had some decent results, and there seemed to be a bright future ahead. For the past few months, though, management made a slew of much criticized choices, benching some of the team's best players, including their captain, moving the other players around to different roles, bringing in a couple of weaker additions, then bringing back the captain, then letting their best remaining rifle player go, then it was a mess, is my point. And obviously, the team fell off hard. Turns out, per a recent interview with Fozy, one of the players they jerked around for months, management had been consulting ChatGPT for advice on player moves.
I mean, I'm not sure what happened. I heard ChatGPT was involved a bit with taking suggestions for players.
Is that? I'm sorry, but I have to interject. Seriously?
From what I've heard, yeah.
ChatGPT.
Yeah.
So like, hey, ChatGPT, if I want to replace Stanislaw and Fozy, who do you think should do it? I mean, that seems patently absurd and almost comical to...
That's not how this works! That's not how any of this works! It's a chatbot, it's not a genie! I want to stick with this example for a minute longer, though, because managing a CS team is hard, but it's not random. The best teams generally know how to do it, and it's not even a question of scale. The big Saudi sports washing team with infinite budget routinely disappoints, while smaller orgs like Heroic and Gamer Legion are famous for their ability to put together competitive roster after competitive roster, even without the ability to sign the best players. Except Rez. Rez is the best. Gamer Legion, please send me some merch, please. Thank you. At the end of the day, it's a question of good scouting, good player management, good coaching, buy-in from upstairs, and being agile enough to maximize luck. That's the solution. We already have the solution. We had it before ChatGPT. So the thing coming out of the chatbot is something else. Remember, an LLM generates answers. It doesn't know things. That's how it works. What it gives you is a thing that looks right. Output masquerading as solution. And I think that's important. Because people aren't generating solutions from AI solely in the esports world, obviously. It'll do space colonization. It'll stop crime. Don't look into the way all these models have all been trained to be racist. It'll be fine, probably. Returning to Hollywood, it's the same with Asteria. To quote a piece from The Verge, like many generative AI advocates, Musa sees the technology as a democratizing tool that can make the creation of art more accessible. Funny how Hollywood only started caring about democratizing itself after the technology that lets you hire less people started getting developed, isn't it? It's like the business types are seeing a new shiny square peg all their friends are talking about and then drilling a new randomly shaped hole to jam it down. But all the other holes, the ones that might actually need filling, are still there, because it's not about filling the holes. It's about keeping your spot above them. Again, take Hollywood. The film industry's problems are many, including continuing disruption from the 2023 strikes, as well as rising ticket prices being thrown into sharp relief both by macroeconomic trends and the fact that all the studios started releasing their tentpoles on streaming 3 seconds after they go out in theaters. But in my eyes, its most emblematic issue is short-termism. The way for decades now, studios have bet more and more on remakes and franchises at the expense of fresh IP and more diverse modes of storytelling, and the way, as a result, there's not really anything new bubbling beneath the life support franchises aside from toy and video game movies, both of which continue to rely on nostalgia and pre-existing brand attachment. To me, this is a telling one because unlike the strikes and the streaming stuff, it is chronic, and unlike the increasing sting of ticket prices, it is self-inflicted. And AI doesn't even touch this. It can't do new ideas. And as even Natasha Lyonne admits, it certainly can't do screenplays. No, this short-termism is not solved, but is mirrored by the way behind-the-scenes AI adoption drains the talent pool, the way there will be less expertise among Hollywood concept artists and FX crews in the coming decades as a direct result. And obviously, the disconnect between problems and AI as solution is far bigger than Hollywood. Some theoretical better AI gets pitched as the solution even to that most urgent, most all-encompassing of problems, climate change. Sam Altman tells us AI will, quote, fix the climate. Dario Amodei, yes, that fucker again, says much the same. This despite the fact that we've known how to combat climate change for decades, right? Immediately slashing carbon outputs, going green by building up transit and scaling up renewable energy generation and not closing down our nuclear for the meantime, and ultimately switching to a degrowth economy. Now, I'm not saying machine learning has no role to play in tackling climate change, but I am saying that we can use it for that now, too. We could have used it for that years ago. That's the conclusion of the non-profit Climate Change AI, at any rate. The group was formed by prominent AI scientists back in 2019 to push for the adoption of machine learning technologies in the struggle against, the planet dying. Stuff like developing more resistant buildings or more efficient power grids, but to quote Karen Howe again, I'm getting this from her book, researchers would tell me that the main challenge of working in these areas was not technical limitations. It was quite the opposite, persuading talented scientists to focus on problems that necessitated rather simple machine learning solutions, instead of the latest cutting-edge techniques that satisfied their ambitions and looked better on a research resume. It was also finding the political will to deploy those solutions globally. Technologies that would address climate change have been available for years, but have largely not been adopted at scale by society, wrote the climate change AI researchers in their white paper. The point is summed up well on the Climate Change AI website. Machine learning is not a silver bullet and should serve to supplement, rather than divert attention from, other impactful actions to address climate change. We don't lack solutions. We lack the buy-in from the people with the power to be in the decision-making room. We lack change. It's the same in our Hollywood microcosm. An obscene amount of the entertainment industry's wealth is simply pooling in the hands of the businessmen at the top. Think about how many more movies you could make each year, or how much more funding you could divert to fresh, low-profile projects struggling with budget if you siphoned off some cash from those disgustingly bloated executive salaries. David Zaslav got paid $52 million last year. Even if we were absurdly generous and let him keep $2 million of that, we're still talking an extra 400 Blair Witch projects every year. And yes, I did adjust for inflation. You'd probably get even more movies out of it too when you account for the films Zaslav unmakes. Because sure, you get a shot at more money if you fire all the humans working on the movie, but you also get a shot at more money if you stop reheating the same 5 IPs over and over again and allow new ideas to flourish. Or what about the strikes, right? The box office still hasn't quite recovered, as coverage of the industry routinely points out. Plenty of the would-be hits that have released recently suffered as a result of 2023's disruptions. Captain America Brave New World would surely have grossed more than $415 million if it weren't a pile of hot dookie. But this continuing post-strike shakiness never happens if those same fuckheads so eager to tell us they used AI to make a dogshit Wizard of Oz upscale had just met the very reasonable demands of the people who actually make them all of that Scrooge McDuck money. It all comes down to this. What the powerful see in AI is not the ability to fix problems. It is instead the vague possibility of a future fix that doesn't cost them anything. One just credible enough for them to sell. Output masquerading as solution. And that's our final key takeaway. The executive class's love affair with AI isn't motivated by any good it might theoretically do. It's motivated by AI providing a potential wedge against structural change, against them losing out. If AI handles climate change, politicians and companies don't have to sacrifice anything. If AI fixes Hollywood, the studio's position of dominance continues unabated, and all those pesky people that work beneath them can keep on getting ignored. When I say AI only offers a vague possibility because, well, I mean, think about it. Getting poor quality effects, or maybe one day poor quality scripts at a fraction of the cost you'd pay for decent ones, that is the best case scenario here if we pretend these businesses will ever work, that's barely even a band-aid fix. Let me say that again. The absolute best case scenario for AI in Hollywood, if the AI bubble doesn't burst, if businesses like Asteria and Moon Valley somehow manage to land in the 5% instead of the 95%, if these quote-unquote ethically sourced options are able to beat out their less moral, more efficient competitors, if the technology someday advances beyond the level of nonsense itineraries and moving wallpapers, if the big players ever actually integrate these technologies on a non-trivial scale, if their audiences and creatives get on board, and if the social, financial, and environmental costs of AI don't see Hollywood burned down or bombed in the meantime, that best case scenario is saving a bit of money on productions. No, sorry, saving a bit of money on productions while cutting a whole host of creatives, today's and tomorrow's, out of the process. Even from a purely financial standpoint, that's just kicking the can down the road a little. The same far larger processes which have sent Hollywood into an increasingly shaky state over the past few decades will continue unabated. That's the glorious future we've got to stop worrying and love the GPT for. Put like that, it sounds stupid, right? But we're not supposed to be putting it like that. We're supposed to be in awe of all the little fragments of information tech companies and studios deign to bestow upon us. We're not supposed to try and put them together. As we noted earlier, the opacity of this whole sector is intentional. They don't want us to see behind the curtain, and by and large, the tech media is only too happy to go along. There are probably a couple of inaccuracies in this video, or assumptions I've been wrong to make, but that's because peons like you and I, outside of the big tech bubble, have to rely on media middlemen to tell us the basics. Middlemen that, as we've seen, are often biased, often make mistakes themselves. Like our good buddy Roger, who going from Indeed's estimates likely makes more money annually writing pieces like this than I have in the entire history of this YouTube channel, and probably before too. I don't mean to get all woe is me, but isn't something wrong if I have to be the guy pointing out the holes here? If you're getting that sort of pay packet to cover business in Hollywood, couldn't you at least double check your numbers? And look, I think I've turned this video around pretty quickly, all things considered, but even still, it's been a while. Even if 10, 50, 100,000 people see it when it's out, even if half of them learn a thing or two about the flaws in the current discourse around AI, how many more pieces will Cheng or writers like him have put out in the meantime? Brandolini's Lord Type B, right? I talked last year in my first big AI video about the soul-crushing avalanche of AI sludge flooding platforms, but honestly, the more depressing slop wave here is the one coming from people. People that should know better. Cheng should know better for the same reason Lyonne should know better. The fact that as writers, as actors, as creatives, We're kind of all in this together. And I don't just mean that as a platitude. One of the reasons generative AI's got as far as it has, amassed so many users churning out artificial prose or reheated mid-journey art, so many musicians happy to replace artists, and artists happy to replace musicians, is the way neoliberalism has all of us, even in the arts, viewing ourselves first and foremost as self-sufficient, disconnected individuals, has us compulsively looking out for number one. I don't blame anyone for not realizing this idea is a swindle right away. Hell, if you'd said the same thing to me about my YouTube videos a couple of years ago, I probably would have taken it pretty badly. I'll have you know, I'm solely responsible for every frame of these videos. Every word I'd have bristled in response. But in most of those frames, I'm editing with content other people have made, whether it be a shot from a TV show, or a screenshot from an article, or a quote from a book, and maybe I'm speaking over a royalty-free track a musician has very kindly uploaded to the YouTube audio library. And stylistically, the way I'm presenting my ideas is absolutely indebted to countless creators. Big Joel, Folding Ideas, Zoe B, H Bomber Guy, Innuendo Studios, Nando V Movies. I could keep going for a while. All of whose work I soaked in like a sponge before ever trying this out myself. The way I'm coming at AI here is indelibly colored by writers like the aforementioned Karen Howe and Ed Zitron. You see the point I'm making, right? All of us, actors, journalists, effects workers, writers, take inspiration from existing things we love, get taught the ropes by others in our field, exchange ideas and tips and tricks with our peers, and 1,000 other things, today more than ever, in a way that unites disciplines across boundaries between locations. So every time a journalist scores an easy hit of virality with a piece over-exaggerating AI capabilities, or in the case of publications like Sports Illustrated or the Chicago Sun-Times, by using AI to churn those pieces out, riddled with inaccuracies, or every time a star boosts their profile by endorsing or running AI studios which replace smaller names in front of and behind the camera, they are, in effect, propping themselves up by pushing their fellow creatives down. And this time it's not a rising tide that lifts all ships. It's more like the prisoner's dilemma. It's more like an MC Escher painting. Individually, everyone thinks they can get up because they're not seeing the whole picture. Big tech and investment firms have pumped vast quantities of money, vast beyond comprehension, into the development, training, and scaling of transformer-based neural networks, and they'd have us think all sorts of things about the result. But as of now, all they've really built is a machine for kicking cans down the road, endorsed by the self-interested and the cruel. Generative AI getting good enough to effectively replace humans in entertainment is not imminent, and is not inevitable. Indeed, it's looking more and more inevitable by the day. And regardless of that tech's eventual feasibility, it wouldn't be a long-term solution to the problems Hollywood, or the world, actually has. It'd barely be a short-term one. An enormous and enormously precarious house of cards has been built from AI and careless AI investment by the rich and powerful. And, same as it ever was, they've put all of us on the hook for it. Seriously, go check where your 401k's invested. If and when this all falls down then, and we find ourselves no nearer a fixed climate, no nearer a more sustainable and equitable entertainment industry, no better off, indeed far worse off, hey, at least now we know who to point the pitchforks at, and which structures of power we ought to collectively renegotiate to stop all us from getting swindled again. Insert astronaut meme here. And that's that. For now. Those of you who follow me on other platforms will know I've been teasing a big AI video for a little while now, and this actually wasn't that video. This was simply the result of me being knee-deep in the research process for that video and coming across a particularly stinky piece of reporting. So think of this as an amuse-bouche. Actually, that's misleading. It'll almost certainly turn out shorter. This one got long. But it'll probably have more heft to it also. So stick around for the main course, which should be coming sometime in the next month or two, and keep even more up to date regarding how that's coming along with a Patreon membership, maybe. Now that I think about it, this has taken so long that there might be another couple of videos I have to release in between. But yeah, Patreon. Signing up is also the best way to ensure I can keep making videos like these. And kind of the only way. This isn't the place to get super into it, but both the number of people YouTube is showing my videos to and the amount I'm earning per view have dropped a ton in the past few months. So if I can't shore things up with viewer support, I don't know what the future of this channel really looks like, or even if it has one, so please do consider supporting me if you've been liking my stuff, and are in a good place money-wise, and becoming as cool in the process as all of the people named on screen now, and especially Hanan, Daniel Goldhorn, Harry Price, Kwangyu Liu, Nothings, Something Something Capitalism Bad, Thomas R, and Weirdy Beardy. The minimum number I'm trying to hit is 200 paying members between Patreon and YouTube by the end of the year, and keep an eye on my posts tab and social media feeds over the next few days, because I'll be laying out a more detailed member goals / stretch rewards plan. Like, maybe if we hit a certain number, I'll make an even longer video than this one. I don't know, I'm still figuring it out. But that's all I got for you today. This is like the 5th time I'm filming this conclusion because the camera keeps crashing. I don't know why, so I hope it hasn't crashed again now. Either way, more stuff coming soon, and thanks again to today's sponsor, Planet Wild. Make sure you check them out. If you want to see them in action, why don't you have a look at the project I mentioned earlier, which is using Earth Smiles to restore dry landscapes in Kenya, and which you can watch right here.